Yusuf on Salam Media and One Nation FM.
We will have an update on the Mufti Menk UAE iftar dinner and apology. We'll have an update on that coming up pretty shortly before we wrap up the show. So listen out for that, right? We have been running with this feature called the 20 most historically significant mosques in South Africa. It's not an absolute list, of course it's not, but it's just a gut feeling from our side, and we think for whatever reason these mosques have made an impact in various parts of the South African Muslim and therefore community landscape. One such mosque is the Nurul Islam Mosque or Masjid in Lenasia, and I can tell you now, when you come to Lenasia or Lens, it's a landmark mosque, and although the entrances have now differed before, no matter where you are, you can't miss it as you enter Lens. So let's find out more about Nurul Islam and its own history, because that's really what the purpose is, to get the history of the mosque right. With me is Maulana Yusuf Ravat. Assalamu alaikum, and good talking to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah Ashraf, to you and to your listeners, and I must commend you all on this initiative. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless it and make it inspirational for one and all.
Thank you. I think many others are saying we also want to be on that list, and alhamdulillah, we want to have 100 of the 200 most historically significant masjids in the country, if not in the world, sometime soon, right? So let's talk about this. I don't live in Lens, but as a laity, spent some years in Lens, and I very aware of the mosque and frequented very often at the time when Hafiz Nurbai was the imam and the qari at that mosque, and read so beautifully. But let's go back to, how did this mosque start and what happened?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So as we all will know, the Nurul Islam Masjid is the biggest obviously in Lenasia. Some would even rate it to be one of the biggest in South Africa and Southern Africa, right? From the onset, the vision of the founding fathers and the efforts of the subsequent committees, including the current committee itself, was not only to provide a place of worship, but rather to provide multiple services to the immediate community and the broader region. And that, alhamdulillah, has been successful. And if for that we go down to memory lane. So in the early 70s, Marhum Hassan Chopdat had suggested to the pioneer of Nurul Islam, and that was Dr. Mamoniat, that there is a need and scope for another masjid in Lens, right? Now, as it is today, you will get that flag from the community that one more and another more. But again, his mission here was, and his motivation was, that he didn't just want a masjid, he wanted an entire center for the community of Lenasia. So it started off by him and his brother purchasing the land with their own wealth, and what an investment, I must say. In the year 2022, we can safely and securely say that they've reaped great rewards for the year after, right? Thereafter, he set up a committee, obviously. He couldn't do everything himself. There were few families that were influential at that time. There was the Choptat family, the Lolgat family, the Ravat family, the Mamoniat family, and the Lahori family. And surprisingly, members from these families through the ages and generations have served as committee members. In fact, 45 years later today, there are members from these families who are still serving. It's like the inheritance of Varso that has just been passed on generation after generation, right?
Yeah.
So, he purchased the land. Now it came time to build. The estimated cost at that time in 1975 was 1 million rand for a 4-phase project. 350 was dedicated just for the masjid, which was going to accommodate 2,000 worshippers. And then phase 2, 3, 4 were going to include a nursery school, an Islamic school of 19 classrooms, a library, and a hall, right? An amazing thing was the architecture. At that time, we didn't have many Muslim architects like today. So Dr. Mamoniat actually hired a non-Muslim architect. He flew him all the way to Egypt and told him to glean some flavor of Islamic architecture when building this masjid. And that's what makes the masjid so unique. And another thing is, if you notice, if you come to the masjid, right, for the size of the masjid, there are very few pillar obstructions compared to modern day masajid. I mean, you go to any of the new masajid nowadays, which are big, and there's just pillars everywhere. And sometimes as a speaker, you look and you speak more to pillars than the congregation. You come to the Nurul Islam Masjid, the actual masjid, we can take up to 1,500 people. You sit anywhere and you won't find yourself distracted, and you won't find yourself obstructed in any way. An interesting story in terms of, the building of the masjid, the maintenance. Around the early 90s, there was a structural problem with the roof. And Dr. Mamoniat was informed it was going to cost 300,000 rand, which is a lot of money. That's actually the actual cost in 20 years before that of the masjid. So he was one of the first Muslims to arrange a banquet in this region at the Carlton Center. And it would be a good guess if you could, who was the world-renowned guest of honor for this function was none other than the marhum Muhammad Ali, the boxer, the great
Okay.
Muhammad
Well,
Ali.
yeah.
And through this function, funds were raised and renovations were underway. So, in a brief, that was the history of how the masjid was established, right? But again, what we take from there it was the main aspect, and it was the objective. He didn't just want a masjid; he wanted a center. And
And I
when
think you've got the sense. I mean, you've got it from from meetings that have taken place, not just Islamic meetings, other political, civic society meetings. All these things have happened there, and you've got your school. So it is very much a centerpiece, even if it's not in the center of Lenasia. It's very much at the entrance of it, but it's made that impact, right? And yes, you're right. I think architecturally it's quite superb, and it left a mark. And one thing I know, as someone who appreciates good kira, if I detect at that stage that the sound system in the mosque, we can have a different debate about the hall. I think it's a bit different in the hall. In the mosque itself was always top notch. Yeah.
Yeah, they were very particular. I would say they were also particular in who they hired as imams in this masjid. Obviously, the masjid is the core, right? If I were to give you an overview of the masjid and go through the different departments, in depth, it will take too long, right? But just allow me, if I could just give you a brief
Yeah.
overview. What is the masjid, right? So, like you mentioned, initially the first imam appointed was Qari Yusuf Nur Bhai Rahmatullah Alayh. Thereafter, subsequent to him was Qari Rafiq Aturani and Qari Imran Nabi. These three alone formed what was known as the Golden Era, where people
Yeah.
from around Johannesburg and as far as Klerksdorp and Petersburg would come just for Taraweeh to the Nurul Islam Masjid. And through the years, they maintained it. That whichever the Imam they brought, they tried to bring those of the highest caliber in terms of recitation and tajweed, etc. But what makes the masjid unique is the facilities. It serves as a perfect venue for hosting international prominent guests, various programs by other organizations. Now, if you just listen, you're like, oh, but Mana facilities are everywhere, right? It's a masjid can take up 2,000 people. It has the outside area, which is the old Janaza area. I don't know if you know, that can take up to another 500 people. It has a 100-seater auditorium. It has two halls, which can take up to 2,000 people seated around tables. And uniquely, it has parking, which can accommodate up to 400 cars. This I haven't seen, I don't know, to my knowledge, anywhere in South Africa where you can boast of such a huge parking lot. Parking is always an issue. The entire community and the streets become flooded with cars. We don't have such an issue in our masjid. So because of that, alhamdulillah, programs are like ongoing throughout the year. And over the years, we've hosted the names and the prominent guests. Still, with over 30 masjids today, 45 years later, Nurul Islam is still, like you said, the center of Islamic education and worship. There's something in the recent decade, we would say in the past 12 years, we've hosted the annual Sira Jalsa, which has become so common and famous that it's replicated now in KZN on the same weekend where about 2,000 people come and they benefit from the Sira of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We have our ladies Salah facilities who, pass buyers going through lanes, use it on an occasional basis. We have a maktab, we have a nursery school, we have an Islamic school. Nursery schools also, in terms of Lenasia, they would know is one of the best in terms of Lenasia. But the school is something I'll touch on, right? Dr. Momoniat had a vision. Not only did he want an Islamic school, which ran for 35 years, both for males and females, boys and girls, he had a vision that he wanted the only Muslim girls' school. And that took 35 years to happen. So it started off as a school and it carried on in the current committee with a lot of effort. And I think since around 2017 or 2018, it now fully functions as the only girls' school with a full staff complement of only uppers. And it's succeeding. I mean, every year they get good results, and every year they're among the top achievers. The next were two departments which were there in the past but currently don't exist. I don't know if you recall. He had one of the first fully fledged Islamic libraries in this region, right? And he had a Dawah center. And there's a very interesting story when I was researching. In the late 60s, Dr. Momoni had heard that King Faisal was in Switzerland. So he took a bold step of flying across the world. He went all the way to Switzerland. He pitched up at this hotel. He tells the guards, I've come from South Africa and I want to meet the king of Saudi Arabia. So they laughed at him and told him that you're crazy. That's not going to happen. He was insistent. He said, I just want 5 minutes. And eventually this commotion reached the top floor and the king asked, like, what's going on? He said, no, there's a person here who's adamant. He came from South Africa. He wants to meet you and he doesn't want to leave. So the king said, okay, let him up. And they say that for that 5 minute meeting then prolonged and it went on for a long time. They discussed many issues. In fact, they say he was the first South African to meet the king in the apartheid
Okay.
government.
Yeah.
Even before the government, he met the king. And through that, they established Dawah relations. So today, you will see the Al Tawheed Center, which is run by the leadership of Sheikh Basuni. Sheikh Basuni was actually on his way to Brazil. But post that meeting, the king had now redirected him and told him that no, you will go to South Africa. Qari Yusuf Nurbai and Dr. Mamuniat welcome him. They established him. They set up things for him. And there was a Dawah center here under Ravat Alamiya Al Islamiyya. And thereafter, Sheikh Basuni moved on to Al Tawheed. So he had a great passion for Dawah. And if you come here, you will still see offers that's now been converted. But originally, that was the Dawah center that was there.
Okay, that's so fascinating. What about obviously the name Dr. Mamoniat is absolutely synonymous to the Nurul Islam Center. I think everybody knows that. But what about Rabita? I'm looking at your stone there in the wall, and that organization called Rabita that was involved in establishing the mosque. I mean, who are they? What was their plan?
They basically they still in existence today, right? The Rabat Al Alam Al Islamiyya. They're one of the main organizations under the leadership of the Saudi government in terms of dawah throughout the world. So many a time, if you find a South African saying, "I'm going to study in Saudi Arabia," it will be through the Rabita. The Rabita are the ones who will arrange, Islamic education for South Africans that are going to Medina. But like that, they've now, over the years, they've sent their scholars throughout the world for dawah, and they then also assist them financially in setting up dawah centers, masajid, etc. So he had very close relations. Actually, the same plaque you're speaking about is the plaque that's written there in terms of the foundation. Many of these ulama that came from Saudi Arabia were the ones who laid the foundation of this masjid. So he was very, very closely related to them, and hence that's why he started his dawah center. And it ran for many years. I don't know for how long exactly, but currently it's non-existent. But for a long period of time, there was an official dawah center here at the masjid under the auspices of Rabat Al Alam Al Islamiyya.
Okay, I tell you what, let's leave it at that. We could talk lots more, but I think the onus is on me and the other members of the audience to take a keener interest on the Nurul Islam Mosque when next they visit there, or make a point to do that. I certainly will take a big interest when next they come to Lens and see what happens there. Thank you for your time, most appreciated. And yeah, there's no doubt that mosque amongst the more historically significant mosques of the many thousands that we have in our country. Maulana Yusuf Ravat, thanks for your time. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah, Ashraf. Pleasure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you. So there we are. Do you go to the Nurul Islam Mosque now? Do you remember all those imams? Well, Qari Nurbai, Yusuf Nurbai, I certainly followed him extensively, but also, he mentioned the Haturani and Nabi, but that's when I was a lighty. Don't go much there now, but I mean, do you go and what do you make of that particular mosque? Let's we're going to wrap up with an update on what's happened around Mufti Menk and that iftar dinner in the UAE after this.